So I just wanted to get on here and talk about my labor and delivery story. I didn't get a chance to completely explain everything that happened when I was going through, and I do have a delivery vlog on my channel. A lot happened and I wasn't able to talk about it just because I was still processing, and I also wasn't able to record everything because I was really emotional, and when things go wrong or something is happening to your baby, the last thing that you're thinking about is grabbing the camera and documenting it. So I just wanted to get on here and talk about my delivery experience or story with having a C-section and having a high-risk pregnancy with placenta previa. So a lot of people, if you don't know what placenta previa is, something that happens in the uterus where the placenta is low-lying or it is completely covering the cervix, making it impossible for the baby to pass through. So it puts you at a higher risk because they don't want you going into labor. If anything happens to the placenta before the baby gets out, it can be detrimental. So they really keep a close eye on you and baby just to make sure everything is okay. Starting from the beginning, about 4 weeks out before my actual due date, I actually met with my OB and they went over all of the risks and dangers, if you will, about what happens when you do schedule a C-section, because that is your only option. That was something that I was heartbroken about, because with my first child I was able to deliver naturally as far as being able to have her vaginally, but with this baby the opportunity was taken away from me, so I was a little bit emotional about that. But at the end of the day, it's just about making sure baby is safe and making sure that everything is okay with me and baby. So about a month out, they schedule you for to do paperwork. So this paperwork is you signing all these waiver forms and going over all of the things that could go wrong, which was something that I wasn't aware of. So like, I did research about placenta previa because I wanted to know what I was going into. I didn't want to feel blindsided, but I didn't find a lot of vlogs or videos on YouTube with women that had this condition that actually talked about these things and talked about the risks and the things that come with having placenta previa. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to get on here and talk about it. But at the time I was around I want to say 34-ish weeks. And they brought me in and the OB checked baby again. He just wanted to make sure that the placenta was low lying or it was completely covering, and they usually tell you they can spot it early. So they knew I had placenta previa by the time I was 24 months, and that's a whole reason within itself. But normally they can spot it earlier than that, but I just wasn't able to get care sooner. So I ended up, we were in transition to moving to Guam, where we are right now, and we had a month off and I wasn't able to have an OB. So from the time I think I was like 15 weeks to around like 20-ish weeks, I wasn't able to get care for the baby. So very stressful time. But when I was able to get scheduled and get care, they ended up finding out that I had placenta previa, and they checked me more often. They also tell you to watch out for bleeding, because if something happens or shifts, you will probably get some bleeding. In my research, and even the doctor told me if I'm bleeding so much, they will put you on bed rest. So luckily that didn't happen. I didn't bleed at all during my pregnancy, but it was something that was really stressful. So for, you know, a month out, they ended up checking baby, double checking to make sure that the placenta was low lying or covering the cervix. They usually tell you that it's like the placenta stretches like a balloon, so as your uterus gets bigger, the placenta gets bigger and it kind of shifts and moves. So they were hoping that by the time I delivered, it would have moved over enough to where it wasn't completely covering. However, the opposite happened. It completely moved down. So there was no hope for me at that point as far as having a vaginal delivery. So I pretty much put on my big girl panties and I sucked it up and I was like, okay, we're doing this. So by that time, after the doctor checked me, he pulled out all of the paperwork and he went over everything with me. So the risks that come with it are hemorrhaging. Sorry, that took like forever. So something that can happen is hemorrhaging. So when they go in and try to remove the baby, what can happen is the uterine lining can be very sensitive and temperamental, and if something happens, you can start bleeding out, which can lead to you to have a blood transfusion, which is also another risk that they tell you. A lot of the blood, I guess, is not 100% safe as far as the things that come with getting blood transfusions. Your body could reject it, or you can get some type of blood disease, or it could just, not a lot of good things can happen from getting a blood transfusion. There are some women that get them and they work out just fine, but there are other situations where he was like, you can get Hep A, or you can get like this blood disease. Also, on top of like getting that, you can also suffer from blood clots, which can be very serious and dangerous and deadly. So they also talked about that. He also warned me about having to possibly have my uterus taken out. So that was also a big deal for me, because even though that was my second baby, I didn't know if I wanted another kid. I wasn't sure. I kind of was like, I'm done. But to have that choice taken away from you, it kind of does something to you. So I was really emotional about that. Possibly having my uterus taken out to save the babies in my life. But I had to get over it. And then also, just with having any surgery, death is a possibility. So I was going under anesthesia. They were cutting me open, you know, anything could have happened, and that was also a possibility. So I had to sign this waiver, and I was not feeling good about it at all. I was just like, I literally started praying, and I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I hope everything is okay. So I was panicking about that. So they ended up scheduling me for a scheduled C-section at 37 weeks, and this is something, I think I was 37 weeks in like a couple days, but this is something that a lot of the videos that I watched didn't talk about. So I ended up, you'll pick up from the vlog, it was the night before. I was really nervous, so you have to wake up early the day of, around like 4 a.m. 5 a.m. and call the mother baby unit to see like if they have availability or like room for you. So that's what we did, and of course they had room. So by the time we got there and we dropped our daughter off at a friend's house, and we booked it to the hospital. So when we got there, they put us in like this not triage room, but it kind of was a triage room. And they hooked me up, well, they had me change into a gown, and then they hooked me and baby up to a bunch of monitors just to make sure heart rate and everything was okay, check to see if I was having contractions, which I already was. Side note about that, so if you have a child prior to being pregnant with placenta previa, they will ask you about what time you gave, like around what time you actually went into labor and gave birth. For me, I went into early labor. So with my first child, I went into labor around 38 weeks. And they typically say if your first one is early, then you're probably going to deliver earlier with your next children after that. So to stop that from happening, because I had placenta previa, that was the reason why they scheduled me so early at 37 weeks. So when I got there, They hooked me and baby up. They tried to get me on an IV drip, which was totally unsuccessful because at the time they tell you not to eat or drink anything for like, I think it's 16 to 24 hours. So by the time you get there, you're dehydrated as hell, you're hungry as hell, and you can't have anything. And then on top of that, if you're dehydrated, your veins are automatically smaller and more restricted, so it just makes it that much harder for them to get an IV in you. And I already have tricky veins with my first child. It took them 9 times. I got poked 9 times all up my arms for them trying to find a spot to get the IV in, and they couldn't, so they ended up having to do it in the middle of my arm where they usually draw blood, which is something that they don't like to do just because the arm bends a lot and it can cut off whatever they're trying to get to you. So same thing ended up happening. I told them about my first experience. They didn't listen. So I ended up having to get poked, I think about like 4 or 5 times, which isn't that bad, until they were like, okay, like we're gonna listen to you. And they ended up going through my arm. So right after that, things kind of went really fast and we weren't able to record, but they bring in my mother and baby nurse. They also bring in my OR nurse. They also bring in the anesthesiologist, and it's a lot going on at one time. So we were there, I think around like 5. By the time they got the IV in, got me hooked up, monitored for about an hour, it was about 6:37, and they told me that the doctor would be in around 8. So by the time we talked to everybody, got comfortable, it was pretty much go time. So the anesthesiologist went over all my questions, went over the things that I might be feeling, which are nausea, something that they don't mention. Also, you can feel dizzy and a lot of pressure. So when I didn't know what to expect, I had had an epidural before, but I had never had like a full spinal anesthesia, which is when you're numb from pretty much the boobs down. When I got there, of course, they're like, okay, you know, we're gonna take you down, your husband's gonna go. So they separated us, and he wasn't able to record because by the time I got on the table, it was a lot going on. They couldn't find baby's heart rate when I was on the table. So I'm sitting up before I got the anesthesia. I'm sitting up and they're trying to like wrap these straps around my stomach, and then I'm also hunched over because I have the anesthesiologist behind me behind me, and he's trying to like get the spinal in. They did let me play music, so that was a huge blessing because my nerves were through the roof. Not only was I by myself, not only was I nervous about what was about to happen, not only did they have a hard time finding the baby's heart rate, I was also hunched over, getting a huge needle stuck through my spine that can temporarily paralyze me or do something bad if I move the wrong way. And then, you know, I was, you know, scared. I was by myself. So by the time they got the music going, I felt a little bit better. Everything went smoothly. They found the baby's heart rate. They were able to get the needle in. And within like a couple of minutes, it was like I started feeling it. So it's very slow and it's very overwhelming at the same time, which is a little weird. But they lay me down, they clean me up. If you don't shave, they shave you down there, but I was already shaved. There's something I didn't know about a C-section is I was there by myself for about 30 minutes, but it felt a lot longer, to be honest with you. I was under the impression that before they started, my husband would be by my side, and I don't know if the hospital I was at just did something differently than what they normally do, but for my experience, I didn't have anyone that I recognized for about 30 minutes, and this is the first time that I'm having like major surgery. I'm worried about my baby.